So I want to introduce a couple of my friends here. I'm gonna go back chronologically. I'm gonna start with Bill, because Bill and I met back in 2000 and 2001. Actually, in fact, 2000 to 2004. I put on a songwriting camp in Canada called the Creative Collective, and we were kind of the first of the ilk of songwriting camps. I mean, Bill, I don't know. I don't recall songwriting camps before we started it. I felt like we were the first, and I think actually Mike McCarty, who we had on from SoCan, would probably acknowledge that. And so Bill, who I was always such a huge fan of his work, had attended one of our camps. I want to say it was like year 3 maybe or something like that. And
Metalworks.
That's right, at Metalworks, and we got into and we wrote our first song, and we had met, but we had actually met a few years earlier when he was Tom Cochran's guitar player, and I was in a band that was opening for Tom Cochran, and we actually met briefly at Lee's Palace, maybe in the like 97, 98 or something like that. Yeah. But anyway, but Bill is a remarkably talented songwriter and producer, incredible guitar player, obviously. And whenever I'm in a room with him, I'm the second handsomest guy in the room. But I can live with that. But also, what's so impressive about Bill is that he also is quite visionary in how he has worked in his career. And what I mean is to say is that, you know, he met a young artist named Justin Ozuka, really helped unlock that sound. And probably most notably, Bill did extensive work for many, many, many years with Jason Mraz. So he's been involved with Jason Mraz almost from day one, I think, Bill, and we're going to get into more of that as we go. But Bill, I want to thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for.
And then I'm going to ask you guys to speak a little bit more in depth about yourself, to basically brag a bit. Now, I want to introduce Carri. Now, Dr. Carri Jones is not a musical person, but she has made no bones about the fact that she loves creative people. And I've had a chance to have some very in-depth and complex conversations with Carri over the last couple of years since we've met. And just she has such an unbelievable perspective on creativity and spirituality and sort of well-being, even though none of those things really fall in her I think in your skill set, but you're just so good at talking about it. And every time we get off of conversations, I feel better about myself, which is quite nice. So you have that impact on all of us. But also I think what makes Carri sort of very uniquely position to have this conversation is that Carri's partner is a creative who is and I don't want to really focus too much on Issa, but she is a showrunner and creator of shows like Man in the High Castle and there's another great one that you guys did on Amazon too, right? What was the other show?
Electric Dreams.
Yes, Electric Dreams. Thank you.
The library is Blade Runner. All those good ones. Yeah. So I'm blessed with having creativity all around me.
So she lives with creativity. So she lives with it every day. So and I just wanted to thank you.
It's a struggle. The struggle is real.
It is. It is. And so how we're going to do this is I'm going to bounce back and forth between Bill and Carri. And usually, as you guys know, I like to sort of leave one with a thought for when I'm going to come back to them. So I wanted to jump back to Bill here for a moment. So Bill, in 1,000 words or less, tell us a bit about your journey, because you really have worn many hats in your career. And I know that with all of those hats come various different challenges. You at one point made a decision to just stop touring with Jason Mraz, for example, that to focus on other things. And of course, those all have a sort of a psychological impact. But maybe give us a bit of your backstory.
I don't think my backstory is that much different than a lot of people. I just had this dream of being a guitar player from when I was a kid. My parents weren't musical, so I had to do it myself. And I basically decided when I was 9 to play guitar, and I made a living from it. So I think I think I'm most proud of that I sort of had this dream when I was a kid and just sort of made it happen. But I didn't have a plan when I was a kid. I just wanted to play music. And so every decision I made from then was, how can I play guitar? How can I do this at making a living? And for me, being a kid, it was a cover band. And so I'm glad I did that, because I really sucked as a guitar player when I was a kid. So I got in the band with people that were better than me, and I always surrounded myself with musicians that were better than me and people I could learn from. And so I did that, and got burnt out on the cover gig when I was 21, started playing with an artist in Canada named Amanda Marshall, who's really good. And then, but this is before she had a record deal. She was about 17 or 18 at the time. And then from there, we opened for Tom Cochrane. And then Tom and I became friends, and then I joined him on his follow-up to Life is a Highway, album called Ragged Ass Road, and I've been with him now for 26 years. And the thing is, through all these musical relationships, they're all friend-based. Like I haven't auditioned for anything. And then with Jason, well, actually played with Tom. All of a sudden with Tom, we did the Ragged Ass Road Tour. And funny, Amanda was opening for us, and Amanda came out with her first album, and her album went 7 times platinum. And so she was killing us on tour as far as her success. But it was great to see, you know, because I used to play with her, and we're all friends. And so after Tom's tour, I was at the pinnacle of what I thought I wanted to do. I became a rock star. I was playing arenas, and I was a guitar player, and the lights were happening. The money was great, and I still wasn't happy. And so I couldn't figure out why. And so I basically took all the money I made from the tour and moved to California for 6 months and sat on a beach and tried to figure out my life and figure out what I wanted to do. And then Tom called out of the blue and asked if I would musical direct an acoustic tour. And that for me was amazing, because I just felt that I was kind of in a cover gig playing for Tom Cochrane, because I was doing all these amazing songs of his, but I wasn't creatively involved in the making of these songs. So I still felt in a way that I was doing a glorified cover gig. So when Tom asked me to be musical director for this acoustic tour, and I had a chance to offer my creativity on the project, and then it eventually made a record called Songs of the Circling Spirit around it, which I'm really happy with that record. But even more importantly, I met my future wife on that tour, because she was the opening act. So Tom said, "Listen, Bill, don't sleep with the opening act. She's really cute. We're going to be on tour for a long time." And I went, no, it's going to be good. You know, everything's fine. 2 weeks in, we hooked up, and then Tom came to our wedding and went, "I knew it was something different about you guys." So Tara, being a great artist, and she was signed to Network at the time, and Network was Sarah McLachlan's label, with Tara McBride being the manager. So we got on all the Little Fair tours back, you know, when we're still a new act and trying to make this happen. And then with Tara, I was also co-writing the songs and producing it. So we ended up getting a record deal with Capitol in Los Angeles, moved to California. I'm trying to speed up the 1,000 words. And then our very first American tour was playing cafes around California. And this young artist named Jason Mraz was our opening act. And he hadn't done any recording at that point. And I had a little studio at Hollywood and Cahuenga. And so I asked him to come to the studio as friends again, and we recorded a song called You and I Both, which became the second single off his first album, and just became friends. And then how it happened was, cut to about 3 years later, unfortunately, Tara and I were getting a divorce, and I all I had was my guitars and a bachelor apartment. And Jason called out of the blue, and he went, "Hey, Bill, I have a new single called The Remedy, and we're on tour, and I have a hit album. And I need a guitar player. Can you come out on tour with me?" I said, "Yes, when?" And he went, "Tomorrow, I'm in Dallas." And I went, "All right." And went and bought the CD at a record store, jumped on a plane, learned it, and jumped on tour with Jason. And I've been playing with him since 2002, 2003.
Wow. I love that. It's, you know, it's one thing to know when to say no, but it's another thing to know when to say yes. And
I always say yes. Unless no one's required.
Yeah, I think saying yes takes you on some great adventures, honestly. You know, you said something that I want to come back to, where you talked about having all of the success and not being happy. So I just wanted you to sort of contemplate that as I talk to Carri for a moment, because I think that's such a powerful thing to have said so early on in our conversation, to be quite honest. So have a think about that, because I want to come back to that. I really want to expand on that.
Yes.
So Carri, what makes you so in love with creative people?
Empathy, you know, it's everything, right? You can't be altruistic, you can't be helpful, you can't lead You can't teach and mentor. You can't have good health, all of it, unless you have empathy. And creatives, I'm so science-based and data-driven from my background. And I was lucky to play musical instruments and play sports and all that, and paint and, draw when I was younger. And then, you get up until your adulthood, and you have to kind of really drill down and focus, for a while to become very successful and skilled at what you do. And you lose some of the things that really were the elements and the foundation of who you were. And so when you rediscover that, you're not going to let it go. So I rediscovered that through my creatives, right? All my relationships. And I found myself every time when I speak with you or, my other friends that are creative, I get so inspired. I'm so happy, right? I get outside of myself. It's, the world becomes everything else but me. And it's just that space. And then knowing that I've had privilege, and then the pillars of health, being a public health sleuth too, education and health are how we can drive socioeconomic upward mobility. So I've learned through technology and unique engagement tools that we can immerse, people and quickly, proficiently improve their ability to learn and have access, like platforms like MDIIO, access to potential that they never had. So sorry, it's kind of all linked in there, but
well, of course, I want to talk about Human Foundry too, because I think that's so crucial. I love this concept, and maybe you can just talk on that for a moment. But I just wanted to, I want to kind of pull you back for a moment, because you said something that you just kind of glossed over, which I think is like, both of you're both so intuitive and inspirational but you mentioned the sort of the energy that creative people exude, and how you sort of feed off of it, even though you're quite science and data driven, as you said, right? Maybe talk about what that energy means. Like, I think a lot of times as a creative, you don't really understand what you're putting out to other people in that way. So maybe can you talk a little bit about that?
I mean, on a scientific level, again, going back to that, the kinetics of it, it's hormonal, right? It's chemistry. So when an auditory response, and it just lights up, if I go into talk to you guys about something called functional MRI. So MRI scan, functional means that we can actually put people in them and subject them to different experiments and experiences and see how their brain lights up. So you can play music. If I'm laying in the MRI, the functional MRI, and you'll see parts of my brain light up that are linked to happiness, calm, I would report to you, all these wonderful things. Sometimes it helps me sleep better, right? It gives we could do biometrics in my physiology. My heart rate comes down, my blood pressure comes down, so all those things that music links to, it's psychological, it's physical, so physiologic, and it can become cognitive, right? Because if all those things keep influencing one human being, over time, it actually changes the way they think and respond. So you in music, being creative, you have such like a powerful tool. And to me, since I don't have that skill set, I'm in so much, in awe of it. So I don't know. That's why every time I talk to you, I get so excited. We talk about music and all these different things. But I see a lot of suffering. I still practice medicine as well as running Human Foundry and helping other companies and people and mentoring. But I keep my roots in medicine because I get, I'm lucky. I hear private chapters of people's lives. They trust me. And I appreciate that they share with me some of their deepest, fears and challenges. And so sometimes I do use music, for therapy. So it's, it's just part of that whole streaming of consciousness, science, and spirituality and wellness.
I want to come back and talk about Human Foundry, because I think the concept is so brilliant, and that I'm just all about involving myself however I can. So have a thought on that. I know you've done that pitch a million times, but you're about to make it 1,000,001. And I want to talk to Bill about, because you talked about happiness, and you talked about the sort of the visceral physical response to music. Now, Bill, it's funny, you had mentioned something about how you sort of seemingly had everything you wanted, but you didn't feel fulfilled, or you didn't feel happy.
Right.
Can years later now, can you look back at what that was? Because you've made a major transition and transformation in your life.
Right.
You've been quite open and honest about it. Why weren't you happy?
Well, then I didn't know. How old was I then? I would have been 35, and I had suffered from sexual abuse as a child. My father was extremely angry, alcoholic, misogynistic. Not a very nice man. He has his own issues, of course, and I've since forgiven him because it's what you have to do. You have to move on. But at the time, I didn't deal with any of this, and so I was in full self-sabotage mode, where anything good that happened, I didn't believe that I deserved it. And that comes right up until 3 years ago when I had my nervous breakdown, which was a long time coming. As a matter of fact, my therapist said, "Thank God for your nervous breakdown. It was the best thing that's ever happened to you because it cleared the channels and allowed you then to grow and to learn, because for 50 years, you've been storing all of that shit, and finally it just like a volcano exploded." And so he said, for most of my professional life, I was doing everything I could to sabotage myself, but because I'm a fairly, I guess people think a good looking person, and I kind of look clean cut and that sort of thing. And so I can get away with all this debauchery and everybody be like, "Oh, Bill's fine. Don't worry about him. He shows up, he does his work." But behind the scenes, I was doing everything I could to destroy myself. So I just wasn't really enjoying any aspect of it.
Well, pardon the language, but my rabbi, when I was going through some stuff, particularly when my brother died, my rabbi, just hit me with a real zinger. He said, there's more people out there that are functionally fucked up than you might imagine.
Totally.
And that just stuck with me in such a powerful manner to know that people were functionally fucked up. And that sounds kind of like what you were, right?
But it's funny, and it took me a lot of years to realize when I'm going through all that pain, you think you're an island, and you think that nobody else is really feeling as much pain as I'm feeling, and that's completely untrue. That majority of people are going through an immense amount of pain and are just not talking about it. So now that I've gotten through it, I feel like I don't have any shame about my past pain, and in fact, I think it made me who I am now, and so I'm grateful for it.
Do you? In fact, I was going to say, do you go back now and in many ways sort of like replay the past and kind of almost appreciate it now more than for what you've gone through? Do to think back?
No, not really. I'm a forward thinker guy, and so sometimes I'll listen to an album I've done, or I'll see a YouTube video of a concert that I've done, and I'll think, wow, that's really cool. But then when I look back, there's so much pain surrounding those times and behind the scenes of me hurting people and hurting myself, that I'm looking forward right now.
I love that. I want to come back to you because I want to talk about how you're kind of dealing with that stuff on a day-to-day basis. Sure. Because I know that you started your Instagram page, Kicking the Black Dog, and I want to talk about that a little bit.
Which I've actually just changed the name because in the spirit of being. Sorry?
I couldn't tag you. I was trying to tag you. I couldn't find it.
No, I changed it to Let Love Rule 1111. Because in the spirit of the Black Lives Matter, I started learning a lot about racism, which I thought I knew a lot about, but I started learning a lot more. And then Winston Churchill, who I named Kicking the Black Dog after his famous quote of the black dog of depression is on my back constantly. Mm-hmm. And so I had to learn. I've learned that he was a racist and changed the name of Kicking the Black Dog.
Wow, amazing.
And again, in the spirit of that, we can all do better, and I didn't know.
Well, so what's the current Instagram handle?
Let Love Rule 1111.
So Let Love Rule 1111.
That's it.
Go find it. Carri, I want to talk about Human Foundry a little bit because it's such a I just love it. I just love the concept. Maybe you can speak to that and sort of why you've come up with this.
Sure. Well, it circles back with creative dev shop, basically. So I've always been attracted to, in the technology world, unique engagement tools, because I know that'll capture people's attention. And then obviously it can be used to educate, make awareness. So Human Foundry came out of just the crossroads of how can you help people proficiently learn, gain, and be intuitive and gain knowledge and experience in a playful manner where they're safe before they go out in the real world. So basically, we use the one platform we're working on now is there's a lot of, it's simulation based. So we're using all those widgets and tools like facial recognition, sentiment, tone, how do you react, the cognitive database, and we work with the world's best. So I'm taking real, empiric science, research-based individuals that most people can't have access to, like the people at Stanford, and maybe in the music world, it would be Berkeley, right? These are the kind of things we can do. And I felt like, how do we scale and allow more people have access to the best of the best in the world? So that was the idea of the platform. So, we're still really early in building it. But it's giving you a lot of widgets and tools for data for yourself in a safe place, so that maybe I'll use one thing, negotiation. Okay. So any of us will be in a place at some point in your life where you may negotiate maybe a salary or a deal. And some people feel like maybe I don't, deserve the reward. Maybe they're thinking I'm being disrespectful, all these fears and things that go into it. But at least in this kind of world, you can simulate and go through it, and you learn from the best. And AI is being used to help, learn the technology to learn how you learn. So we move the world around you, so you don't have to, you're more enabled. So anyway, you can go through those nuances, and hopefully gives an individual, confidence and understanding how to go in prepared. How do you present your authentic self? And hopefully it'll help you succeed in that next, level of success.
I love that. I love the concept of the authentic self. I think that's really important because, so oftentimes I think as creatives, as creators, you want to be everything to all people, right? You want to be like, I just want to be loved, right? I'll almost do whatever it takes to feel that acceptance, right? So I've always said you put the most sensitive people in the most insensitive business, and that is a powder keg for self-doubt, depression, just absolute, obliteration of your ego or of your sense of self-worth. All of these things are so bad that, even as a songwriter, for me, I've gone through it, and I know Bill has too, where you sort of have to sit back and take stock of who you are, and then you go, where am I my most authentic self? And if that, and I've come up with something which we've never talked about here, and I've been asked to kind of actually write books about it. And I've come up with this thing called the critical path. And it's about, you determine what that critical path is for you. And if something doesn't, if something is not within the journey of your critical path, just don't do it. It's hard to say no to it, but just don't do it. And, because sometimes it might mean, as Bill can probably relate, someone's going to throw you an obscene amount of money to do something that maybe you don't want to do, but you go, shit, that's a lot of money, right? I'm going to do that. So this is a really long way of saying, how do you handle or maybe how do you find that authentic self? How do you become real with yourself enough to go, maybe I'll never dunk a basketball. So for me, trying to dunk a basketball for the next 10 years is just going to feel like more rejection, more depression. How do you get to that authentic self? Carri, you brought it up, so you have to answer it.
Well, there's multiple ways. I think if, okay, so we're, mindset, right? So you live in your own perception, and sometimes that perception is not reality. So if you're not sure, sometimes it helps to talk to somebody, right? Whether it's a friend, family member, a mentor, or you could actually reach out to, a certified, behaviorist. But the point is really making sure what you're thinking, is correct. And the feedback you get may help you realize that you're getting stuck into like a funnel that maybe wasn't the true reality, and maybe starting to feel bad about it. The other way, is maybe you do recognize it, and then you need strategies to like relaxation techniques or alternatives like acupuncture or exercise, different ways to change your neurochemistry, neurobehavioral changes to be able to allow you to focus and concentrate, so there are multiple strategies.
Does it have to be a like seismic change, or do you think it can be done incrementally and sort of like in bits?
Oh yeah, definitely in bits. We all, us three know, right? There's sometimes where maybe you're lucky to make a huge rocket change, but it's so rare for most people, right? It's sometimes you're sidestepping, sometimes you take a step back before you take two forward. So it's small steps, and I think it's just kind of identifying, subjectivity and objectivity. I'd kind of break it down to like, what are my feelings, and then try and understand why am I feeling around that, and objectively, like what is the topic? What are we looking at? And sometimes, what if I'm only looking at my lens? The optics are different. If I start to think about the other person, maybe they're seeing it totally different. Maybe I'm in an interview and I didn't research their needs, and I didn't really present a win-win. Maybe I was just thinking about my needs. So there's a lot of nuances to the thoughts here.
Well, I'm going to pivot over to Bill here for a moment, because we were talking, about happiness and especially when you're hearing Carri speak, and understanding sort of like acceptance and your authentic self. I know that was a big part of your transition, a couple of years ago. I remember we had breakfast together at Aroma, and you were just like, to me, it felt like whatever it was that was just like that cloud that you were sort of living under.
Yeah.
You just felt like it was like a different Bill. It was like an unvarnished honesty that was just it was so refreshing to see.
Oh, thank you.
How do you get to that authentic self after going through all of this?
Gosh, I mean, I think that you have to be accountable for yourself. I think you have to be real with yourself. And I think that I just basically lied to myself for a long time, that everything was fine and everything's good, and that the big check is going to be around the corner, and that big break is going to be around the corner. But I was always getting big breaks, and checks were coming in. So everything's was always good, but in a way I could never enjoy it. And so for me, it was getting real with myself, and I quit drinking alcohol, which is a big thing, because being, I'm of the age of, I hope I die before I get old, and Keith Richards being the rock and roll guy and holding a bottle of Jack Daniels. And so, and I learned how to hold my alcohol, because I'm not sure how, Justin, I don't think you're not a big drinker, are you?
I don't drink.
But you must have been around the scene back in Lee's Palace, where everybody was getting hammered.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's great for you. And I'd like to pass that question back to you on how you navigated without falling into the party scene, because I navigated by being able to coexist in the party scene and still wake up in the morning and be productive.
Well, I remember going on one of my first writing trips to the UK, and we would go out. I mean, we were seeing people do all kinds of crazy shit, and like until like 2-3 in the morning. And I just, for me, it was like I never wanted to be out of control. I don't know. Maybe that's the type A-ness in me. I could never. I never really liked the idea of. I saw certain people, again, I'm sure you were, we didn't know each other back then, but there was always like the cool, fun people, but then there was like 5 times more people that just looked like dumb, drunk dumbasses. And I was like, I don't want to be that guy, yeah. So for me, it was just about me sort of maintaining a sense of control. I don't admonish it. I mean, if somebody wants to participate, I don't really care. That's their business. It's not my business. But that for me, it just didn't work. It just wasn't something that worked for me,
Absolutely. But it's interesting when I look back on it. My fear was that if I didn't participate in the party thing, then I wouldn't be hanging out with all these great musicians that I wanted to hang out with, that were all partying. That I'd be sent away because they just only wanted to hang around with people that were also partying.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny. Even now today, when I talk to people about, you talk to a lot of young people. I'm now not one of those young people anymore, but when you talk to a lot of young people and they say, what are some tips to get into it? Can I be, I'm like, honestly, hang out, like,
yeah.
people, socialize, Like if you play golf and somebody else plays golf, play golf with them. Like be a part. I remember when I moved to LA. Someone said, a really great way to meet people is that Jerry Bruckheimer does a hockey game every Sunday at Toyota Sports Center. You should go down and see if you can get into that game. So I think there's a certain amount of socialization that has to happen, in order to meet. And by the way, then you have to also be good. So in your case, you were social and you were also good.
Well, yeah, and that's subjective, but I did a thing, I guess, that people liked, but but I just loved playing guitar, and that's what it was. And there's like, I don't even know where I sit on the realm of guitar playing, but it's nowhere near the best. I mean, there's so many great players out there, but what I did do is I showed up all the time, and I did the work, and I was organized, and I learned how to be professional. Maybe it was from doing those cover gigs all those years. You're 3 sets a night, 45 minutes a set. So you got to show up and you have to entertain. And when people are drunk, you have to learn how to direct your energy to the audience on how to make it more fun or whatever you want to do and how to direct people. So you just learn those little skills, or you learn how to perform when you're sick, when you have the flu and you're throwing up in a bucket side stage.
Oh, that's that. I'm going to tell a funny story about the one tour that I went on, but I'm not going to tell that story. But let's just say I can sort of relate. It's funny.
But if any professional musician can, because if you're sick and you take a night off, you can't, because they can't give those tickets back. So you got to perform through your sickness.
That's right.
And I can tell you, back in the day, tequila helped that.
You
bit me in the ass, and I don't do that anymore.
You make a really good point. I also thought the first place I went to, because I struggled with this for many years in my career, was, and I'm still not that great at it. My wife would probably attest to this. I'm not so great at vacationing because I feel like I'm missing something. I have like major FOMO. So the idea of like we can't go away. So it was always like, I speak to a lot of other friends of mine that are highly functioning people, and they take a week off. The first 3 days are a nightmare. The fourth day they've accepted it, and by day 5 they're already understanding that they're about to go back to work. So they
I have a name dropping story I could tell you about that.
Can we come back and discuss it in a moment?
Yeah.
Okay, so write that down. Let's not forget that. Carri, I wanted to go back to something that you were talking about, because it kind of led me into a couple of different tools maybe that you might have just sort of sitting in your tool belt for us to sort of get. One is how do we know or be or capable of accepting feedback or criticism without knowing that it's personal, or without taking it as, because oftentimes I say writing a song is like having a baby, and not all babies are cute. So how can we look inwardly as we sort of understand what feedback is and determine where it comes from and that it's not hurtful. And by the way, I want to ask one more question. How do you also give feedback with empathy, but also with some sense of poignancy too, right? Like you want to be able to give somebody real feedback and not try to like murder their spirit. But I think that's truthfulness is important, right?
I can liken this when in medicine, if I have a client and about to share with them the diagnostics of what's going on, right? They've come into the office because they don't feel well. I'm in orthopedics. So I've always learned at a young age that if you lead with the problem, you lose your audience. They don't hear you, right? Everything just doesn't matter what you say at that point. So I've always learned to lead with what are the good things. So I'll talk about, here's the amazing parts about your living architecture and what you've been doing, right? Because it's true, because I want to encourage them and incentivize them that they are doing those right behaviors. And then I will say, and here's the one issue, here's your disc herniation causing the pain. And then they can hear me, right? So then we can talk about the issue, the diagnosis, the actionable plan, and be participatory, because if I approach it a different way, I lose them. So I think that's what I would say, engaging in anybody's feedback, that would always be a good strategy, right? Lead with the positives of the individual. What are the highlights? And then it's easier to kind of bridge that into some of the things that could be improved, or it may not even be about improving. It may just be that you're you're not the right candidate, or you just don't have this right skill set, right? So there's upskilling, right? So I think it's exploring how you present, and on the flip side, when you receive it, it's the mirror of that.
But how do you receive it when somebody doesn't understand the sensitivities around that? You know what I mean? Like for example, like look at Issa, for example. She, I'm sure you are privileged enough to see scenes as they come in, or you're watching the evolution, or you're reading a script early, or whatever. Like you're a part of that creative process, and I'm sure that you think everything that she does is amazing. But what happens if you're like, well, this could be better, and she's sensitive? I'm assuming that she's sensitive, right? And like she's a creative, she's a sensitive, she's a and you obviously are very empathetic. So I know that you're going to deliver this news to her accordingly. But how would she take? Maybe she could speak to it, but maybe you can by proxy. How does she take it when she gets notes back from Amazon going, here's 100 notes on something that she thought was amazing, right? How does she deal with it, and how do you help her deal with it?
Well, I actually had to learn, and I had to work on it, learn active listening. It's a real skill. So you have to listen to what somebody wants for feedback, right? Not everybody wants feedback, I learned. Sometimes they just want you to listen. And sometimes then they might want to hear a point, or, something like that. So, and the other part is you bring up a spouse. That's a whole different dynamic. So I stay out of the lane totally stay out of the lane unless I'm asked about it. So I think what I can bring it into, let's say, like a coworker, or, like I'm lucky to be in a place where I have a lot of people working with me. So I'll bring it up like a lot of young people that work with me. Because I expect them all to be leaders. So if there's something that I have to give constructive criticism, then it's always around leadership. Because and I'll preface it that way. When you're going to be running the unit at the hospital, you're excellent at this, and I know that you're going to be a leader, and we'll talk about some of the shortcomings. And I'll yoke it to the expectations in the future of how I see them as amazing, brilliant, really they're big changers, life changers. So that's how I present it. So I think, you have to be very thoughtful in your criticism. I think it's an art. It's a skill set. It's not something that not everybody's good at that. Like I had to work on it.
It's interesting. I often get approached with people sending me demos to say, let me know what you think, and my response almost always is, how honest can I be? And if someone, I want to just set that expectation, because if someone's, if I feel like they're just searching for validation for their work, then I'm probably not the right person. But if they really want sincere and authentic feedback, and I know that they're prepared for it, I'm willing to give that. Once we set that,
that's supposed to be learn, right? I learn a lot from everybody, right? It's a give and take. So
absolutely, and I'm with you. I kiss ass before I kick it, right? I'm with you. Compliment people so that they understand you're just not jumping into like, this is terrible and here's the following reasons. Like, so I'm with you, and I want to go back to Bill, because although I know we were going to come back to a certain topic, we could jump on it too if you wanted to, but I know that you wake up every day with intent and purpose, and one of the things I also want to know is, what are some of those tools that you do to set your mind right every day? What are some of those habits, some of those disciplines? If I know you, you're not just sleeping until whenever you wake up, and you're not eating whenever you want, and you're not eating whatever you want. I know that you're a disciplined guy. So what are some of those skills and habits that you've adopted over the last couple of years?
Well, it's funny that you say that, because I'm not that disciplined, and lately with COVID happening, and the fact that I haven't really been working that much, I've been allowing myself to sleep in, because I had so much anxiety the first few months about trying to be productive and just feeling stuck, that I've kind of allowed myself now to be on vacation. because normally maybe I would be on vacation, but I'm stuck at home. So home for me is a creative environment. So I've now, again, we talk about perspective. My new perspective is to allow myself to be on vacation in my home. But I never deviate. I don't really deviate from my healthcare rituals because those are the things that really help me: yoga, meditation, eating well, exercise. Those are the pillars for me that I have to maintain in order to maintain my proper mental health. Because I've experimented with dropping a few of those pillars, and it always goes badly for me, and I always slip into old patterns.
That's interesting. I think sometimes people undervalue the importance of discipline. I hear what you're saying, and I've also stopped being a bit as hard on myself. Like if I'm, if it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon and I'm just not feeling it, then
Yeah.
I'm just, I'm not gonna. I don't want to create an unnecessary link between forcing myself to work and being at home and a pandemic that is beyond all of our control. And Carri, I want to talk to you about that, about sort of, the current state of the pandemic and how it applies and how you see it. But, but Bill, for another moment, the idea of gracing yourself some humanity, right? And not being so hard on yourself. I mean, I'm one of those people too. And I'm not always the best at it. If I'm being honest, you guys, yesterday I felt very guilty for taking the day off, but I also was dealing with kidney stones. So,
ouch.
Yeah, it's okay. But I woke up this morning and I was like, I was compelled to get back to the studio because there was so much stuff that I had missed on, right? There's emails that I didn't send out. So I'm not the best at that. So how do you treat yourself with that sort of that empathy?
Are you asking me?
Yes, I am.
Great. Well, I mean, I've realized that I've worked so much in my life, and I've been so you use the word discipline, but I call it obsessive. I mean, my whole life was music. I read music magazines. I watch music movies. All my friends are musicians. And coming out the other side of this, I just realized that there's a big, wide world out there with all these incredible things happening that are unrelated to music, that are equally beautiful and gorgeous. And I'm all of a sudden, I have a new relationship with my daughter now. And so taking time off from music, let me ask you a question, Justin, because for me, when my daughter was born, it unified my workflow. Where before, when I'd produce a song, say one song, it would take me 16 hours, and I would stay awake for those 16 hours and work till 4 a.m. and labor over the hi-hat or whether some weird thing was off. And now, after having my daughter, I want to spend time with her, so I would produce that same song in 4 hours. And when I look back, my work after my daughter was born was much better. Because I knew what I was doing at that point. So I did all the work leading up to it, but just having that concentrated time allowed me to actually do better work than just screwing around for 16 hours worrying about a hi-hat.
Well, I remember we were mutually friends with Alan Reed, and when Alan used to be the vice president of Universal, he had made a comment to me early in my production career when I was working on some record for him, and he said, "Is that hi-hat going to sell one more record?" I don't think so.
Totally.
So for me, it was like, and then I also read up on, I think it was Don Was that said, nobody bought a record for the snare drum sound.
Right. So, but we obsess over it.
We do. And we should actually have another conversation about, completing music and how do we know. But the truth is, I always said that finishing a song was sort of like you have time and money. And when the two connect, you're out, you're done, you're finished. So,
right.
And again, I think that comes about.
And again, as you know, studios are designed to cut out the outside world. And so there's a lot of studios that don't have windows. And for me now, I don't work in those studios anymore. I want light. And I make it a point to go out for a walk and take breaks.
Actually, that was the best thing about getting a dog. Because now I have a dog of the day. Guys, we have some questions we want to get to, but Carri, I wanted to come back to you here for a moment because I hate that we did it again. There you go. We did it again. We have intentions of going to Q&A, and then the conversation gets so gripping and enthralling that you're like, damn, we're late. So, guys, I know there's only a couple questions, but please drop your questions in on the right in the text chat so we could really get to them because I don't want to do all the talking here. But one of the challenges that I've always personally battled. And Carri, I wonder what your sense of this is, and it doesn't even have to necessarily connect to music, but I always say this. I say this to my kids all the time. Everybody's running their own race. You don't have to compare where you're at to where somebody else is at, and you hope that they don't compare themselves to you. But obviously, that we do that, right? We say, oh, why did that, and I had this problem, like, oh, why did that person get the cut, or why did they have the Grammy? And now what I've done is I've learned to go, well, if these are my friends and these are the people that I hang out with and work with every day who respect me, and they're winning Grammys, well, that means that maybe I'll get there too. And so I've actually learned to be happy for my friends, and take it as positively competitive as opposed to feeling shittier about myself for somebody else's success. In your mind, even you and how we met actually has nothing to do with music and has nothing to do with medicine. We met at, I think, Techstars in San Francisco through a mutual friend who has, and we just sort of connected on that way. But everybody can apply the same principle, right? Like, you're seeing another tech company and they're getting funded and you're not. Why are they getting funded? How do you deal with that? How do we deal with, what are tools that we can use to understand that we're running our own race, to understand that we are in our own lanes?
I think you said it already. Celebrate community. When you get outside of yourself, that's when you are your best self, right? Bill brought it up. I got into my daughter. I doing this and that, right? You forgot about yourself. But you're like, I know I've got some of this work to do, and you like that work, and you're still doing it because it is the work. But hey, there's some really cool stuff happening today. I'm motivated to get this done because I've got, we're going to go and do the bike ride. We're going to go do this. I'm going to go be with my daughter. It's celebrating community. I've learned actually from helping a lot of entrepreneurs. One in particular, I kept watching him, and just like you said, it was a startup, and here he's trying to get funding, and he kept helping other startup founders. And I remember at one point I was just ready to chime in and kind of say, dude, what are you doing? You need to focus on what you're doing. And I pulled back, and just like we talked about, there's always so many lessons that you learn from a lot of people in different ways. So I watched him, and he kept helping other entrepreneurs and still kind of, going in the lane of the company I was helping him with. And he'd go in, bits and pieces and starts, but he kept helping others. I kept thinking, how can he focus on helping all these other people and survive? He's a startup, right? 90% fail. But you know what? All of a sudden, he was on the Business Channel, for Black entrepreneurs on CNBC. And, and he's doing this and that. And it was just such a great lesson, just watching him. And, I think I've always done it, but he helped me see it. And it's just what you brought up. You got to keep working on yourself. You can learn by having community. We all know this. We learn from each other, right? If you open source your soul, how do I play this? How do I record that? How did you get there? I'm not feeling this. I'm in a slump. I think that's what helps us, right? The community experience. And when you shut down, if you get into an emotional place or a production, glut, that's right. You just got to put everything down and get out of it, whether it's reaching out to somebody or nature or whatever it is. But we know you have to change that lane for a moment. So,
well, it's so true because as you guys can see, I've never mentioned video once on this call, but that's what we are trying to do is we're trying to build that sense of community because as Bill talked about, we're, oftentimes we're sitting in the studio, we're in our bubble, very sort of, segregated away from the rest of the world. And we kind of do this. And one of the things that I've learned personally, and this has taken me years to get to, guys, and it's not easy, which is not attaching outcome to the experience. In other words, what I'm saying is that I do a song, I put a song together, I make it the best that I can do. Right? If I could sit back and go, this is the best that I can do. Once it's done and it's sort of put out into the universe through my various relationships or whatever, what's going to happen is going to happen. I can't tie my happiness to the outcome of what happens. I have to tie my happiness to going, I did something that I felt great about today, and that makes me feel good. And what's going to happen is going to happen. I know it seems like a bit airy fairy, but to me, I can't concern myself with the outcomes that I don't myself have control over, right? and I can't, and it's been taking me a long time to get over jealousy and all of those sorts of things. And I feel better for it. I'm not as good as I can be, but I'm doing my best to be. But I see we have questions coming in, thankfully. So Suzanne, the voice in the sky is going to give us some questions.
I got everything to work, so hopefully this stays working. The first question is from Reiner. As a lifelong creator, giving soul food to others through my music, what have you found that consistently nourishes you?
That's actually a good question for both of you, because I think that Bill as a creator and Carri as a consumer, I think probably have a different perspective on this. Let's start with Bill.
For me, it's been travel. Traveling, meeting people in different walks of life, and realizing how great things are and how terrible things are. Just the whole gamut of life, and experiences, and learning. It's funny, Justin. We're talking about producing, and I think this ties into that question. Is I've learned how to listen a lot more, because as a producer, I felt that I had to steer the ship, and so the idea that I had for the song when I first heard the demo to completion, I felt that I had to hold on to that vision and direct all the musicians towards that vision, or I wouldn't finish the way that I thought that it should be. And then what I realized, as far as asking questions and listening, is the way that I thought it should be might not be the best way for the song. And that if you listen and allow other musicians to come in and offer their perspective on the song, where before I used to shut down their ideas and be like, no, just do it this way. I want the song to sound this way. And I'd shut down all their ideas. And now I don't do that anymore. And so listening and traveling and talking and cooking and all these beautiful things in life just help my creativity.
I love that. I mean, ego is a total vibe killer. I could not agree with you more. I could not agree with you more. But Carri, how do you approach that? I mean, do you want to hear the question again?
No, I think I was going to say, from a consumer standpoint, it's two things. It's like, how does it make me feel? Or it might catapult me back to a memory. And so those are two powerful places to be around music. So
it's such a powerful tool, isn't it? I mean, music is really, it's one of those things where you hear a song and it immediately takes you back. Like, I can't hear What a Wonderful World by Louis Armstrong and not think about my brother. It's like, it's impossible, and so I think that it really is a superpower that we have. You kind of alluded to that earlier, Carri. I mean, it's a bit of a superpower that we have, and I agree. And I think we can't be that hard on ourselves. If we don't have a hit or whatever, I just think we have to be a bit more honest with ourselves. Zan,
just call me. Just call me, because you're right. I'm just like, well, that's amazing. It could be your worst piece, and I'm like, it's brilliant. I love it. See, because you all get stuck in your ways, right? And you think like, this is horrible, and then you talk to Jane Average like me, which I represent, right, the billions of people in the world, and we're like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
that's nice.
But it's funny, because one of the best things that's ever happened to us as musicians is that we started making a living from it. And one of the worst things that's ever happened to us as musicians is we started making a living from it.
That's right. But I mean, Bill, you never got into this for the money. I never got into it for the money. But then, that's an interesting thing, because I did have this question kind of set up for it, which is, we're constantly finding our goalposts, right? Like, we're constantly going, I have a quote that I sort of came up with many years ago, which is, I'm twice as far as where I thought I'd be, but only half as far as where I want to be. So I've been sort of saying that to myself over the years, and it's sadly still applicable today. We reset our bar, right? Like, if you look at Bill Bell now, before all of this happened, and you saw where you were at, you would be like, oh my God, this is amazing, right? Like, if I looked at my 20-year-old self who wants to be a professional record producer, and I think, oh my God, I have a house and I have cars and I have a family and I'm supporting my family with this, like that would have been okay. But yet here I am today, and it's not that it's not okay. I'm very satisfied. Please don't misread this, but I know where I want to go. I also have ambitions for where I want to go, because it opens up, right? Your vision opens up in a way.
Well, and for me, my current benchmark is the truth. I always say, am I speaking my truth on this? Am I being authentic in this music, or am I trying to mix? Am I trying to be impressive? is this guitar part trying to impress people, or am I really feeling this right now? And I have the luxury now to play when I'm feeling it. If I'm not feeling it, I don't do it.
Why didn't we realize this shit 20 years ago, Bill?
It's because dumb kids.
Maybe that's a Carri question. How do we get to self-realization quicker? Or maybe we just don't. Maybe we have to live our lives. Carri, thoughts?
Why would you want to do that? Right? Why would you want to? What really? I mean, honestly, why really? You wouldn't have wanted to have the journey you had looking back at it? No.
I mean, yes, but then also I kind of really want to jump and skip to the last page in a way. No, I don't mean that in a morbid, morose way. I just mean like, I'm not big with cliffhangers.
Well,
but it's great, and now Justin, now you're teaching others. You have this, and you do so much for God. I can name a list of things you do for the music community, but you do so much to give back. So congrats to you.
I can say when you brought that up, it brought back a memory where when I realized I wanted to go to medical school, and I felt like I was turning my wheels in undergrad, just trying to get there. And I said to my advisor at the time, I just want to start medical school. And I still had like 2 years of undergrad left. And she hit me so hard on my arm, and it just shocked me. And she said, look at me. And she said, one day you're going to be me. Do not ever wish time away. And that's what my answer would be to.
Wow.
Amazing.
That is an amazing. Well, yeah, I gotta give you props on that one, Carri. That is a really don't ever wish time away. I guess I didn't mean it like that, but I could see how you took it like that, and I take it back. So
yeah, I mean, how many gorgeous days have we let pass because our mix sounded shitty?
Yeah,
and we're tortured.
Too many. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think you do have to look at it. We can get into the whole nother thing about this, which is the macro versus the micro. And I'm with you. I think that you have to sort of live in the macro, and you hope that the micro takes care of itself.
But again, but you talked about a spiritual practice, and that's living in the now, which I finally I'm still a student of, because I don't know if I'll ever truly live it. But I keep reminding myself to just live in the now. How am I feeling right now? How does this food taste right now?
Yeah.
And if you don't engage a problem, or have a struggle, how do you grow? How do you innovate? Right? Justin, your technology platform, would it be here if it wasn't for that? You saw a problem, right?
Yes, that's correct. No, no, I'm with you. I'm just impatient, I guess.
I know. Go run.
Exactly. We have one more question I think that's coming in, and we're going to take that. We're going to take it. So Zan, hit us on our last question here.
This one's from Reiner. We'll start with you on this one, Carri. What do you recommend for younger creators as they embrace a world that isn't always kind to creators?
Well, I can feel for that. So I'm married to a woman, so I grew up, right, LGBTQ, and I'm older, so it was very challenging. I'm lucky that I could hide it. So going through and becoming chief resident and all that, I had to play the game and, try to live in a world that, create a different persona than what I really was. So I can have empathy for how that question. It's very tough. What I would like to say is, I don't know your age, but our brain doesn't mature till about age 30. So if you're younger than that, all I can tell you is those really horrible days to remember that this isn't going to be your world. And it's also, you're still maturing in your brain, and you have to give yourself time. And I think kind of when we talked about community, you have to, it's really hard when you're young, but it's hard to forgive other people when they're really not nice to you. But if you keep that within, it's, as you already know, it's a struggle, and it doesn't make you feel well. So sometimes you have to compartmentalize those kind of people, try to forgive them because they don't know you and they don't know your experience. And then seek out those that lift you up, that engage you. Maybe they take you out of your element, but in the most lovely, beautiful way. And as a physician, if you're really struggling, there's people like us are sitting here to help you. There's helplines and other aspects. So I don't know if that was helpful, but
no, I think it is. It is helpful because, as I said earlier, it's a notoriously harsh business, and you're taking very emotional and creative people, and you're literally putting them in the line of fire so often. And look, I have people in my life. I think we all do, quite frankly. It doesn't matter. I think that, Elon Musk does. I don't know. Think about whoever's sort of operating on the highest level. We all have these people in our life that have the ability to give us unbiased feedback, and we will accept it, right? There's some people that you think, they're assholes. Fuck them. I don't care about their opinion. But then there are people in our lives who we truly cherish and value their opinion on a level, and we allow them to be honest with us. And I have those people, and when I speak to them and they give me their advice, I listen with as much intention as possible. And growing up in this business, I know, Bill, I appreciate you said that, but never having a real mentor for me, I felt that it's imperative to be able to try and help people as much as possible, because I kind of learned the hard way. I was like, the closest I had was I had a friend of mine named Mark Baldy, who was my engineer, and he came down with ALS and was unable to work anymore. And I had to learn Pro Tools. And so, that was about the closest thing I had to a mentor in that way. But really being able to give back, and it makes you feel better and you learn and everything. You guys, thank you so much I don't want to keep you. You're so generous with your time today. We do have one more quick question. I see, Zen. That's one more quick question, then we'll go. I promise.
This one's from Jill for Bill, but I think both of you can answer this. What are your best practices you recommend for maintaining continued mindfulness, leaving the ego out of music creation? Thanks for all of your counsel.
I would say that everybody has to answer that question themselves. That's really a personal question on what you do, and you have to sit with yourself and answer what's important to you. And and if you want to be Rage Against the Machine, and if you're authentic with that, and that's your message, then then write protest songs. Or if you want to be Jason Mraz and write love songs, because he's purposely writes songs to make people feel better. That's his objective right now, is trying to make the world a better place. And he authentically comes from that place, like he is that guy. So I just think be mindful of who you are as a person. An interesting example I gave for this, I taught some Cree First Nation kids music a few summers ago, which was amazing. And so these kids, of course, love Drake. And they wanted to start writing songs about popping champagne in the club. And we're having a conversation, well, you haven't really been in a club and popping champagne, so let's write what's real to you. And they ended up writing this incredibly beautiful song about a river that's really important to them up in their community. And just, made my heart swell, just that they just wrote this beautiful song that's real to them.
I feel like that's like the takeaway for today, which is be fair to your authentic self. I feel like if I had to summarize everything into one statement, it feels like that's the common thread. And I think too often we are not fair to our authentic self. We're not to ourselves. We're not fair to ourselves.
Because as musicians, as myself, I can't speak. I've been a people pleaser my entire life, and part of my new sense of self is I'm not going to compromise myself and my integrity to make somebody else happy anymore, because I'm working against myself at that point.
But you line up with people that support that, so it's yes. not difficult. It's not
exactly.
combative.
No, it's not combative. No.
I see that we did have one more that snuck in, and I want to aim this to Carri because she kind of started it on the first question, but this is an extension of the Reiner question. Go ahead, Zan.
Yeah. So on your embracing the world that isn't always kind to creators, the inverse of that, what is it for older creators that the industry hasn't always been kind to?
Well, example, when I relocated from the East Coast to West Coast, older, found myself in a vicarious position. I never had to create a CV or resume for medical. Found myself having to sit down and recreate that. And then I went out, knocking on doors. I didn't know anybody. So I guess if I'm thinking, musician, music, or my vertical medical, I had to keep knocking on doors and they wouldn't open here. It was shocking. And I never felt that before. So it was a sort of rejection. And I kept hearing, because I'm in the Bay Area, well, did you go to Berkeley? Did you go to Stanford? No, I'm my East Coast, person. And so the funny part is in technology, at the same time, I was looking at these jobs in technology, which you hear, that's not where I started. And they're opening the door for me. They were bringing me in because they're like, we value your experience, right? We're going to make technologies about the user experience. And so I had a lot of that as a physician. So I said, wow, here's a new lane I never thought of after feeling oppressed and really sad about not getting plugged into medicine. So I got outside of that space of being so constricted and upset and not sleeping well to get plugged back in. And so I thought I'll veer off for a little bit and take this other lane that I'm being invited to. And I wouldn't have had that if I didn't keep trying. There's also probability, right? If you just knock on one door and it's closed, you got to knock on another. And there's definitely something about the calculus of probability. The more you do, eventually that one door opens up. But the flip side real quick is just because I finally got away from that stress of not being able to be plugged in as a doc, the same day I was just about to accept a job with a technology company, I got a call. And the call was for a medical position. So I guess I can say is that, yep, when ageism or you're changing your geometry or people don't know you, in some area, you just have to get involved. Like you have to put yourself out there. It's hard, but you got to keep pushing and pushing. What we're coming back to, your authentic self. And sometimes if something else opens up, it may not be what you wanted. It may not be perfect, but you can take that lane because it leads back to being happy and back to what you really love, I believe. So.
And I think you're right. I think it's also comparing what you want to what other people have, and then thinking that I want that. And it's not that. I mean, look, I've been very lucky to make music a profession for my career. But having said that, I really feel like I found it, 5 years ago. Like that's really when I feel like I really was like all of these pieces came together. And again, it was about listening to somebody who I've trusted who I had a very deep level of trust with. And I kind of went there, and that's when I developed this concept of the critical path. And ever since I've stayed on that lane, that critical path, I've discovered that things go in the right direction. And when I veer off that lane, it's inevitably it's a car wreck. Always. It literally never is not. I'm never like surprised. Oh, I made the wrong decision. That worked out well. Like ever. I want to thank you guys again. For sharing your time today. We've gone a little bit over time, and thank you so much. I know the time is precious. You guys I feel like I can just go lift up a house now. I'm so inspired by the conversation. And Bill, I'm sorry that you had to go through such a heavy journey, but I'm happy that you're here and you're out the other side. Much better and stronger person and a happier person and all of those things. It's really incredible. And I know that it's not easy. I know. I have people.
The work is worth it. The work is worth it.
You know what? And
for anybody out there questioning, the work is worth it.
And depression is a dark cloud, and it is a big and dense
and it's not real. Like those voices in your head aren't real, and I listened to them for way too long.
You know what? And I know that you're such an open person. If someone wants to come to your Instagram, I'm sure that they will happily reach out to you, and you'll be
100%.
Right. You want to give it to us again?
Let love rule. 11:11.
Right. So you heard it there first, and of course, as always. My email address is jgray@MDIIO.com, MDIIO.com. Hit me up with anything. I know there was a question about sync, and we just didn't want to take up the time. So hit me with your sync question, and I could probably give you a better answer on how to procure syncs than Dr. Carri Jones could. And Carri, thanks again so much. We really did a little bit of a spiritual and philosophical shift today in today's sort of conversation, and it's been amazing. So enlightening, and Carri, as usual, I'm feeling inspired having conversations with you. So I really, really appreciate it. Oh, hearts, there we go. Thanks, as always, to Zan for mining the database and for sending out and facilitating the emails, and my partner Curtis Cerna at MDIIO.com. Some exciting things coming up. We may take next week off. We may not. Check your socials to see. But I want to appreciate just send out my gratitude for everybody here, and stay authentic to your true self. That's the message of the day. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. And I look forward to catching up with everybody later. Have a great day, all. Bye-bye.